So there's been some sort of fallout from the Bernie Sanders campaign, some aftershock. We already talked about some of the beef going on with a former press secretary of Bernie Sanders. Now is something interesting coming out with David Sirota. So you guys know David Sirota. He was hired onto the campaign. He's a journalist, basically. Does a lot of FOIA work, Freedom of Information Act requests to the government to uncover government reports and stuff like that. And so what's really interesting here is um, we've got this piece here from David Sirota. All right, this says in his latest email brief, David Sirota acknowledges he wanted Bernie to go harder on the contrast with Biden and that Bernie declined to do so occasionally. Sirota doesn't tone down his feelings towards Biden either. It says, it says here, at other times, though, the campaign backed off and did not seize opportunities to explicitly and continually spell out big differences between the candidates. Ultimately, Biden was able to avoid having to constantly try to explain his offensive record. Instead, he was allowed to depict himself as a safe, electable unity candidate. Was it fun to always be one of the people pushing the campaign to be more aggressive and also eating poop on Twitter for supposedly being toxic for simply tweeting a few videos of Biden pushing some grotesquely retrograde policy? No, it was not fun. I have more gray hair and less stomach lining because I pushed. I'm no hero or a martyr, but I can tell you it was awful, excruciating, and heartbreaking. But it was necessary. He says, as he himself said, Bernie likes and respects Biden. I personally don't believe that affinity is justified, considering Biden's legislative record, but I'm not going to litigate that point. It is what it is. And so I explained this to you guys from the inside reports that were going on. Remember, this is weeks. Like, I'm talking weeks ago we talked about this. Even from that very first report where it was the report from Ruby Kramer of BuzzFeed, where they basically gave us an inside look into Bernie Sanders and his campaign response to basically losing when the election tide started turning on Super Tuesday. And basically, what it gave us an insight to was there were some people in his campaign, specifically David Sirota and Nina Turner, but especially David Sirota, who basically kept telling Bernie Sanders, bro, you need to go at Joe Biden. And so basically what happened was there was never a knockout blow. Now, the difference between Bernie and Hillary, and by the way, I had problems with Bernie then too, the same problems, was that I hated how he treated Hillary with these kid gloves. And then he went way harder on Hillary than he did on Biden this time, okay? And the reason why is because Bernie and Biden were friends. They were buddies. Biden respected Bernie back when he was a nobody, and so he has great respect for him for that. So he was very hesitant to do so. David Sirota giving him ammunition on South Carolina, telling, hey, bro, you need to go after his record. That was your perfect chance. And by the way, anytime you have a debate in a state, like right before the state's election, that's your golden opportunity to really affect the sort of outcome of that election. I remember in 2016 when we won Michigan, what happened right before the day of Michigan? There was a debate, and it might have even been a multiple day thing, but there was definitely a debate the night before Michigan, and look what happened. Bernie Sanders wins in an insane comeback, a record-breaking comeback, by the way. Nobody's ever seen that before. He was down 15 points aggregate in the polling numbers. So he gave him information like, yo, you need to hit Biden on this, and Bloomberg stop and frisk, and he did none of it, which is like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this, Bernie? Why are you not going after him? And so David Sirota is completely on the money here, and apparently it looks like a former senior Sanders aide has responded. Now, what's kind of cowardly is he did this under anonymity. There's really no excuse for that. It says, quote, what's clear from the sniping over the last few weeks and solidified by today's newsletter is that for David, this campaign was always about David. He's finally getting the attention he so badly wants. But it's sad that in order to get it, he's torching the senator on the way out of the door. Now, this is not something that David is doing as narcissism. He's just giving us some helpful information, some helpful insight, some information everybody wants to be aware of. And he's right. Ultimately, the most important thing is David Sirota was right. If we had taken David Sirota's plan, which was to go after Biden, we would have won. And it's true, David Sirota was the guy posting videos of Joe Biden, and Social Security and all this stuff. He was the one doing that. I remember. Okay, I remember that. So the person in the wrong here is not David Sirota. The person is this coward. Let me say it. Coward for speaking on anonymity dragging David Sirota's name in the mud when that punk, won't even release their name, coward, you know. Whoever this is a snake, and honestly, it might be somebody who's like a plant, one of those plants from Cap or something like that. But ultimately, had we followed David's, plans and strategies, we would have won. But Bernie is too weak, unfortunately, and that's Bernie's fatal flaw that I think is really irresponsible and unacceptable that he did that. I don't even care if that's your personality trait. You've got to overcome it. And I really wish we could have someone with Bernie's sort of consistency and progressiveness with the balls of LBJ is what I would, hope, But Bernie Sanders is a very weak guy, and so that's kind of his gig, which is a fatal flaw, and what ultimately I think in history will go down is sort of his downfall and why he failed.